Today we're diving into something really profound, the powerful lessons we can learn from truth and reconciliation processes all over the world. We're going to explore how these very deliberate approaches to dealing with past trauma can actually give us a kind of roadmap for healing any community that's facing deep, painful divides. So let's just start with this huge question. It doesn't matter if we're talking about a nation recovering from war or a local community ripped apart by injustice. When that basic fabric of social trust has been completely shredded, where do you even start? This is the core challenge that truth and reconciliation tries to tackle. Okay, so let's be clear on what we're talking about. A truth and reconciliation process isn't just some vague idea of, let's all move on. No, it's a formal, structured system. It's designed to do three very specific things. 1, confront what actually happened. 2, establish a factual record that everyone can see. And 3, from that solid ground, begin the incredibly difficult work of rebuilding trust. And that whole journey, well, it has to start somewhere. And that place is often the hardest one to visit, the past. You just can't build a stable future on a shaky foundation of denial or silence. This first stage is all about laying that essential groundwork for everything else to come. So here it is, the first and clearest lesson. You can't even begin to heal until the harm has been acknowledged. Think about it. For victims, having their experiences publicly validated is absolutely essential. It pushes back against the gaslighting of denial, and it starts to chip away at the mistrust that just festers when nobody will name what happened. This shared factual record, it's the non-negotiable first step.
Right. So once you've got that foundation of truth, you can start to focus on the human side of things. This next part is about way more than just facts and figures on a page. It's about restoring the dignity of the people who were harmed. This is where the real power of voice comes in. When survivors are given a platform to tell their own stories in their own words, something incredible happens. They're no longer just passive victims in a history book. They get to reclaim their agency. The whole narrative shifts, away from silence and shame and toward recognition and strength. And this quote, wow, it really nails a profound truth. The simple act of being heard, of having your personal truth acknowledged by the wider community, can be a form of justice all on its own. It speaks to this deep human need that can sometimes be just as healing as any amount of money. But look, just hearing the stories isn't the final chapter, right? After the truth comes out, you have to ask about justice. How does a community actually hold people accountable for what they did, in a way that truly rebuilds trust instead of just starting new cycles of anger and resentment? And this is a really critical distinction to understand. We usually think of justice in one way, retributive, trials, penalties, prison time. But what truth and reconciliation processes have taught us is that there's another path, restorative justice. This is all about repairing the harm that was done, getting people talking, and making sure perpetrators take real accountability for their actions. Think less about just punishment, and more about things like public apologies or community service. And you know what's interesting? You don't actually need perfect justice to make a real difference. Even just partial accountability sends this incredibly powerful signal that some behaviors are just not okay. It shows the system is trying to fix itself, and that credibility, that's absolutely essential for any kind of long-term stability. Peace without any accountability just feels like injustice, and that feeling is like a poison to a community. So this brings us to reconciliation itself. And that word gets thrown around a lot, but it's so often misunderstood. It's not some finish line that you cross one day and boom, everything's fixed. It's a path, a long-winding and difficult path. And this really shows you what that journey looks like in reality. The official commission might wrap up, the final report gets published, but the emotional wounds, those stick around. Real reconciliation demands a sustained, long-term effort from everyone in the community long after the formal process is over. It happens in fits and starts, and it's different for everybody. And here is something that is just non-negotiable. You can't force forgiveness. You can't write it into a law. It has to be a voluntary, deeply personal choice that can only really happen after there's been sincere acknowledgement from the person who caused the harm. Trying to rush it or demand it just creates more resentment. The absolute best a society can do is create the conditions where forgiveness might just become possible. So how do you even begin to create those conditions? Well, one of the most powerful tools out there is structured dialogue. This means intentionally bringing people from opposing sides into the same room in a safe and facilitated way. The goal isn't to force them to agree.
but to break down those ugly stereotypes by letting them see the humanity in the people they once saw as enemies.
Okay, so finally, let's talk about why all this work matters for the future. This isn't just about closing a painful chapter from the past, it's about making sure you can write a much better next one.
There's this really important idea here. Remembering isn't about getting stuck in the past. It's an active, forward-looking strategy. When a community documents and teaches what happened, it creates a kind of shared moral compass. It's a powerful defense against future denial, and it's a way to ensure that those same patterns of harm don't just get repeated by the next generation. But let's be real. These processes are not magic bullets. They can absolutely fail. They can be superficial, get manipulated for political gain, or end up shutting out the very groups that need to be heard. How these things are designed and carried out matters just as much as the good intentions. Rushing it or failing to follow through can sometimes make things even worse. And maybe this is the biggest lesson of all for making change that actually sticks. Apologies, memorials, symbolic gestures, they're all important, but they're not enough. If you don't reform the laws, the economic systems, and the political structures that allowed the injustice to happen in the first place, well, then the reconciliation is incomplete. The root causes are still there, just waiting. So when you put it all together, you see these amazing connections emerge. Truth is what makes acknowledgement possible. Justice, in all its forms, is what builds legitimacy. Giving people a voice is what restores their dignity. And real structural reform is what prevents the whole nightmare from happening all over again. And I want to leave you with this final thought. Reconciliation isn't about trying to forget a painful past. It's about figuring out how to make sure that past no longer defines how people have to live together in the future. It's the hard, essential work of building a more just world, one community at a time.